Hello, and thanks for sticking with us. We're having a good time. and now we have something even more interesting and exciting to share with you. We have some powerful women here that we would like to hear from. They represent women in the workplace in a variety of different intersections and career stages. To moderate the panel, I would like to introduce my friend and partner in crime, Kate Bailey, founder and CEO of TARRA. Since 2014, TARRA has been transforming the way women connect business, life, and community. They are opening their first membership workspace and flexible office campus this year in Denver, and we couldn't be more thrilled to call them our partners. Kate, take it away.
Thanks, Simone. A big thank you to our panelists, to Annie Butler, Kate Hill, and Metropolitan State University for leading this incredible project that we started almost a year ago. As you can see, there are so many opportunities to finally shift the paradigm for professional women. And today we have 4 of Denver's brightest minds for a lively conversation to dig a little deeper into these solutions. You know, equality movements have been around for over a century. We've had marches, we've had changes to our Constitution, we have quotas, we've got advertising campaigns. Large corporations have entire divisions focused on diversity initiatives. Yet, while female participation in the workforce has grown dramatically, collectively, we still only hold a very small fraction of leadership and C-suite roles, and the revenue of women-owned businesses is significantly less than that of our white male peers. As a society, we are all striving towards equal opportunities for women to thrive, but we still haven't properly addressed or changed one of the most fundamental barriers, which is the workplace. Equity in the workplace is not just a policy problem from the top down. It's also a design and culture problem. And if we want to create more opportunities for all women to find success, we have to focus on creating the right ecosystem for them to flourish. And that is what we are addressing here today with this panel of exceptional leaders. After a brief introduction, we're going to dive into some Q&A. And afterwards, we actually want to take questions from the audience. So please make sure your chat function's enabled. There's a little bubble in the top right corner. Please add your questions to the chat. We're really excited about this conversation. So to start by introducing our panelists, we have Julie Chickillo, Vice President of Information Security at Guild Education. Guild is setting a very high benchmark for other businesses in terms of their support of some of the most critical needs for professional women, including on-site childcare, family support benefits. Julie is also a mom of 3, and like so many of you, had to navigate the complexities of homeschooling during COVID, while also managing tech security for one of the state's fastest growing companies. Next, we have Naomi Amaha, Director of Policy and Government Affairs at the Denver Foundation. Naomi is an award-winning public affairs leader with a reputation of excellence in local and state and federal government relations. With more than a decade of experience in political consulting and strategic planning, we're thrilled to have her mind here today. We next have Angel Johnson, CEO and founder of ICONI, an athletic wear company. After 8 years in the military, Angel founded ICONI out of a need to find activewear that was both affordable and functional. Her products have even been endorsed on 2019's Oprah's Favorite Things. And one of the best parts about her company is that she actually donates a whopping 10% of profits to organizations that impact women and children, and she's also one of Amazon's top sellers. Finally, last but very much not least, is Leah Vescovi, Manager of Community Relations and Global Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Action at VF Corporation. Vescovi, who recently actually returned from maternity leave, started working at VF Corp in 2019 on the cusp of the very transformative years of 2020 and 2021. She has worked as a DEI thought partner for Fortune 500 companies and brings innovative ideas to the table on how businesses can better support a more equitable workplace. So on to the Q&A. We're excited to hear from you all. What we're going to do is we're going to go through some of the bigger kind of pieces of the conversation out of our research report. We're starting with policy. That's kind of at the top. And so I'm actually going to pose this question to Naomi. In the last 2 years in Colorado, what is one bill that did pass and one bill that did not pass the legislature that had advancing professional women in mind, and what have been some of the implications of that?
Great, it's a great question. So one bill that passed that went into effect just recently is the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act, also known as the Pay Equity Act. It's gotten a lot of attention nationally because one of the key components says, with every job description, a salary range is required to be posted, which is a great thing for women as they're looking at different job opportunities. They can say, this job I like, and it also meets my salary requirements, as opposed to applying for a job and then trying to figure out, what am I going to ask for, to then determine, okay, I've left some money on the table because I didn't ask for enough money because I didn't know what to ask for. Those barriers are gone. There's another critical component as we think about the conversations around pay and trying to normalize those. So now if colleagues are talking to each other and determine, okay, we have equal skill set, we do a similar job, but you make more than I do, I see those questions, but I can also talk to my manager and say, I think I deserve equal pay, and here are those reasons why. One of the things also that was touched on in the research just presented too is this idea of equitable promotion. So the notion now, if there is a position that is changing, instead of just promoting somebody, that's got to be shared with all staff, and there needs to be a process in which staff can show that they're interested in that role. So now we're creating more opportunities for people to pursue promotions that they maybe didn't know were available because of that law. So it's really exciting and it's groundbreaking, and just so happy that is in place here in Colorado. One bill that didn't pass is the Paid Family and Medical Leave Act. And I say that in that it didn't make it through the legislative process, but voters in 2020 decided that we wanted this law to be in effect in Colorado. We think that our state needs a program like this. And now in 2024, there will be a paid leave program that employers and employees will contribute to. So if, say, I have a medical emergency or I chose to have a child, I don't have to have the finances be a part of my decision making because I know I will get a set amount of my salary because of that paid leave program. And those are just great ways to support women that want to work and want to be able to make choices without having to think about those financial considerations.
Excellent. So Leah, out of curiosity, have you seen some changes like on the ground at VF Corporation because of these laws that have passed?
Sure. I mean, I think you see many organizations across the board seeing this be the voice of the people. They're wanting these things, and so you're really needing to kind of look inwardly and say, are we doing this? Are we supporting this? Are we following the curve of what people are saying they really need to be successful in the workforce and to be fully present and authentically a part of the workforce? So certainly we're seeing that and hearing that and trying to come up with new ways to really kind of meet that need and effectively come up with answers for our teams that supports their requests.
Great. What about at Guild Education? Are you seeing some changes and maybe some more pay equity and some of that movement?
Definitely.
Well?
At Guild Education, this was a huge effort, very extensive project, where we last year were able to look across all the jobs, all the roles, across gender, diversity, all of the things, and we could say that yes, we were able to enact the law, and we didn't just leave it there. We continue to revisit it every 6 months. It's also revisited if we're posting new positions or if we're reconsidering like pay. We're seeing some movement in the industry. We'll reconsider it at the time. So it's been a huge effort at Guild.
Very cool. That's great. I do want to switch over now to business ownership and talk to Angel as our sole business owner on the panel. As a new member to the newer member to the Colorado community, was there anything about Colorado that made you want to actually start and grow your business in Colorado? Were there policies, were there business-friendly initiatives that you saw that really kind of made this feel like it was a friendly state for you?
So my introduction to Colorado was very unique. I was stationed here. At the time, I had been in the military for 5 years, the Air Force, and I was stationed at Buckley Air Force Base for 3 years. So that's my introduction to Colorado. I decided to stay here because going to different networking events and as I built my small business, I saw so many powerful women in the room. So every time I would go to networking events, it would be women receiving rewards, women being the CEOs, or women in these higher leadership positions like the women on the panel with me today. And just the community connections of working with people at Amazon that are women, and that's why I decided to stay in Colorado. It's definitely a very great place for a woman to set up a business.
Absolutely. I always say that if you can see it, you can believe that you can be it. So that's really an indication, I think, of a lot of the initiatives that CWCC and TARRA and other organizations have played. So that's good to hear. Naomi, out of curiosity, kind of going back to the policy side, are there additional policies in the works? Are there things that you would like to see that would better support women-owned businesses? We heard a little bit from the governor today, but curious if there's other things that you would like to actually see happen.
Yeah, so the governor touched on a couple legislative legislative priorities around lessening the burden for those that want to start businesses, so taking away fees to actually start a business. There's some talk around small businesses keeping some of the sales tax revenue that they collect as a way to just further the money that they have to invest in their business. I think for me, I hear a lot of us, we need more money for capital, money for workforce training programs. I think especially now money to address the challenges in the workforce that we've talked about, especially around like childcare and other things too. So I think the more that we can invest in those types of programs and make them either small loans or just grants that don't require people to pay back that money, the better we can see businesses that want to flourish here in the state.
Agreed. Colorado is one of the best states in the nation to start a business, but growing a business is much harder. Yeah. So anything that they can do, Governor, hope you're listening. I want to switch now to a very important, kind of one of the biggest pieces of the conversation, which is equity, diversity, and inclusion in corporations and in business. And Leah, it seems like DEI is at the forefront, right? It's every major corporation's public relations campaign, human resources campaigns, recruitment. In terms of VF Corporation, what initiatives do you feel have really worked in terms of truly advancing, DEI initiatives within the company and that you're actually seeing some results?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's top of mind. Folks are really, they're talking about it, they're digging in, they're doing some soul searching, trying to figure out, where's our part in this and how can we participate? For VF, I will say for those out there, we're a heavily matrixed organization. So remember that what works for us may take a little tweaking to work for you. We also are really lucky to have 11 people on our global team to support this work. So really excited to be a part of that. And for us, I think some of the things that have worked really well is ensuring that it's really a part of our culture. So embedding this work into our purpose, into our values, and ensuring that it flows throughout everything that we do, that it doesn't become sort of a check the box exercise, which I think people hear a lot, you don't want it to be a check the box, but it truly has to be authentic. You have to want to do this and you have to have it embedded into your leadership modeling, the ways that you do promotions, hiring, training. It has to be embedded into everything versus sort of a and item. The second piece I would say is accountability, making sure that you're really thinking through how are you holding yourselves accountable. So for VF, that looked like really putting ourselves out there saying we have gender parity goals by 2050. We're looking to do 25% BIPOC representation in our organization by 2030. I apologize, 2030. And so really trying to find ways to make our map accessible to folks so they know what to expect to us and what to hold us accountable to, of really saying, are you doing it? Because what gets measured is what gets done. And then the last piece I would say is just senior sponsorship, making sure that you have that senior level support because they're in rooms that other folks don't get to be a part of. They're in conversations around funding priorities and what types of things we invest in. And so making sure you have that, I think, is really important. We've been really lucky that we have a fantastic leadership team that's really invested in it. For us, one area you would ask, where are we trying to kind of grow in this a little bit, is we recognize that we're really focused on supporting women in our workforce, but we were missing a little bit of that associate voice. So how can we ensure that our associates are able to really bring that up, make sure that their voice is embedded into what we're doing versus a room of folks who might be a bit removed from it saying, here's what I think is best. So what we've done is created a Women's Empowerment Council. And that council is really sort of a bottoms up and a top down approach where we have our ERG leaders a part of that and they're being able to kind of add the associate voice to the conversation. And then we have leaders across the organization really engaged in listening and trying to say, where are synergies that I have the ability to kind of see because of rooms I get to be in, and how do we make that happen? How do we find the funding for it? How do we make it a priority across the organization? So those are the things that have worked really well for us and made us successful at it, but still plenty of room to grow, plenty of ways that we can continue to work on it, but that's what's worked for us so far.
That's great. And I think that I sort of heard walk the walk, don't just talk the talk. Yeah. That is something that we hear a lot, that there are a lot of businesses that are saying they're doing it, but at the end of the day, it's sort of like greenwashing and climate change, right? Where they're not really digging into setting goals, measuring, and having that both senior leadership and employee buy-in. I mean, we talk a lot about, it's up to the leaders, it's up to the policymakers, it's up to our government. It's not. It's actually, we have to close this gap from the top and from the bottom. And I think that employee engagement engagement is absolutely critical.
Yeah.
In terms of Guild education, what are you all working on? And I mean, it's such an incredible organization. I think you said 67% of your executives are women.
Yes.
So you already have a bit of a leg up. But I'm curious as to, what are those additional advances? I mean, I really look to Guild education as kind of this lighthouse in DEI and really something that a lot of corporations need to be looking at. So what are some of those additional things that you all are looking at and working on?
Yeah, so Guilds also instituted the employee resource groups, the ERGs, not just for women, but many different diversity areas. We also, within those groups, elect leaders. So each group has its own set of elections. They have corporate sponsors, but that allows for the top down plus bottom up. We're also, we take employee engagement surveys twice annually. From there, the business actually sets goals that are measurable and that they can actually see, hey, did we make progress towards these goals? One piece of the survey is actually focused just on DE&I. So they do ask a lot of questions about how are we doing, where could we be doing better, and then they set goals, and then in the next survey, we can see did we make progress towards those goals. So I think that's been important. I would also say that I agree that it can't just be top down. So for the employee resource groups, we do really rely on employees engaging. And so they do a lot of work to get employees engaged. There's a calendar where employees can see what's coming up. We do cross-functional things. So for this month, our Black at Guild group and our women's group have hosted like panels together. So they'll do that.
That's great, yeah.
And we do that for many of the months. The other thing that we've had, I'll say fail early, fail often. Sometimes they cross over. So maybe we had a women's panel at the same time as a Black History Month panel. So then there's conversations about how could we make sure that we're not stepping on each other. And so I think there's still, again, room to grow, but actively having those conversations and making it a safe place to say, hey, your group stepped on my group is also really important.
Absolutely, and understanding those intersectionalities
Yes.
as well. Very cool. Angel, I want to kind of switch over to sort of the equity, diversity, and inclusion from a small business owner standpoint. A couple of different conversations. As a business owner, are there resources that you feel like you've benefited from? I mean, I know that there's probably a lot of either small business owners, entrepreneurs, or wannabe entrepreneurs in the audience, and one of the biggest challenges that we hear at TARRA from our members is that they don't know where the resources are. They don't know where to find the financing resources or the supportive resources. And it sounds like you've done a really great job of just being very curious and kind of diving in and trying to find these. What have been some of the best resources that you've found? And then follow-up question, where do you find them? We'd love to know your secret if you want to share your secret sauce there.
Well, Google University is my secret, but
Right.
one of the best resources I found is the partnership with Amazon. I'm actually in the Black Business Accelerator. So Amazon provided me ad spin and different avenues and different mentoring and coaching. So I've really appreciated Amazon for that. And then additionally, they can look in Colorado's Small Business Development Center. They have tons of resources for small business owners, veteran business owners, Black business owners, and everyone in between. So I think those are great resources, but a lot of it's researching, using organizations like the Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce and going to those bigger organizations and see what resources they have for you. So I think that's one of the main things you can do. And then small business owners, no matter where you fall, whether you're woman-owned, veteran-owned, or Black-owned business, you should apply for everything. So if it's a grant and you may not necessarily get it, you should still apply for it because they may list your business on their website. Mm-hmm. And so I would just encourage us small business owners, just to apply for everything that we can.
Just dig in, right?
Yes.
And Naomi, through the Denver Foundation, are you aware of other resources or organizations that we should be aware of? I mean, just kind of out there in the audience that are good to do research on.
I know Energize Colorado, and then I think was mentioned earlier the Denver Economic Opportunity Office. I might have the name off a little. We partner with them, and there's just a lot of great resources and grant programs that they offer. So I think that's a great point as well. Government wants to be a partner, so we should look to those offices of economic development and see what resources they have because they want to see business thrive in the state.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know that Colorado Women's Chamber and TARRA are both looking at putting together a funding resources panel in the next couple of months. So anybody in the audience that's interested in that, please stay tuned. So a quick reminder also for the audience, don't forget that we're taking questions in the chat. There's a little bubble in the upper right-hand side that you can't really see, but you click on that and then you can add your name and a question. If all else fails, you can text a question to 303-204-7112. So I'm going to kind of move into our final, this is our really big question about making work for women. This is really the central theme of the Great Reset. As Simone said, we will be emailing all participants the white paper to really understand. I mean, the goal of this whole project was really how can we not just talk about what we're doing at a government level, what are we doing at a corporation level, what are we doing at a small business owner level, but what are we also doing at an individual level to be able to shift this ecosystem. We have a broken ecosystem at the end of the day to support women in the workplace. And the pandemic, it wasn't new. None of this is new to any of us. What it did is it really just shined a very, very bright, very hot light on what's happening. And so, I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on how we can make that shift. And I'm going to start with Julie, particularly because you are a mom of 3 school-age children. And I imagine that the pandemic was a little eye-opening in terms of balancing motherhood and work. And I know that at Guild Education, you had a lot of mothers that were dealing with this at the same time and caretakers. As we've seen in the research, millions of moms just left the workforce. They said, I'm done because they don't feel supported in their professional spheres, and it set us back 10 years. That's 10 years of a lot of hard work for all of us. And so what do you think are some of those key initiatives that Guild Education is doing right now that really created that supportive workforce? Because it sounds like it was actually quite the place to be during the pandemic.
Definitely. Yeah, I feel very lucky to have been at Guild during the pandemic. I'd say one of our key initiatives actually started before the pandemic, was opening up an adjacent childcare for Guild employees. It's called the Beehive. And this was a huge effort, really important to our CEO, that we make childcare available to all employees. It's such a barrier to women staying in the workforce. So that was one of our big initiatives. I think the other thing that had to start at the beginning of the pandemic was really normalizing being a woman, an actual all of you woman in the workforce. And so that was really interesting. The panel, we've talked a little bit about how when the pandemic first happened, you could see everybody's things on Zoom, and all of a sudden life was real. And so I've talked about, I went and bought a closet full of snacks for my kids, and I would just have to be like, here's your snacks, while also trying to stay on calls and help them get onto their next class. So that was, I think at Guild, we had to really see like, we are all people, we're all women here, and just normalizing the fact that there are children in our lives, or in some cases, adults that we're taking care of. Yep. And so really started hearing about, hey, I have to take care of an adult, or somebody in my life that isn't a child. So that was really important. Guild really took a hard look at what are the benefits that support a mom or working family. We try not to say working mom, so we say parents, and that what's important. So we've expanded leave benefit. So this covers parents who are trying to do foster care, if you're adopting, if you're going through fertility treatment, if you're coming back into the workforce. We're training managers to have conversations with women. We've started normalizing talking about breastfeeding. If you're a mom and you're having to stop and pump, like you can put a little baby thing in Slack saying, hey, this is my time. You tell your staff, put it on the calendar, make it important. And I think it's important to really do this across all, like not just for women, but for men as well, and saying this is normal, this is part of parenting. Guild actually also rolled out mental health benefits for everybody. We have benefits for backup childcare. So if you lose childcare, we do have a benefit to help you get some backup childcare as well.
Wow. I mean, truly, what a beacon and
Yes.
of hope in all of this. So that's really, really exciting. Leah, this is very personal to you. You are just back from maternity leave, and I'm curious about what VF Corp and partner brands are doing to support some of this idea of both flexible work, but also, you know, being able to help moms, dads, caretakers, et cetera. And then I have a follow-up question to that as well. So.
Sure, yeah. I mean, amazing, you know, to hear what Guild's got. And we, I think, have taken a similar approach. We do offer the backup childcare. We offer fertility benefits for folks just so that it's not a financial burden. It's not all consuming of your kind of mental capacity trying to think through how are we going to do this if I want to start a family. But I would say flexibility has been one of the biggest things we've been able to really offer folks, which the pandemic, I think, fast-tracked that for everyone, that we had to learn how to be flexible, how to be agile. But I think VF really wants to hold on to that for the long haul, to really find ways to make flexibility a tool that folks can use to make work and life really kind of blend well together. So for us, it's really having managers find ways to trust their staff. Make sure that you trust the staff you have on board, that they're going to get it done in the time they have to get it done. If you don't trust your staff to do it, there's probably a bigger conversation that needs to happen.
Absolutely.
And so that's been, I think, really helpful for us. I've been just super lucky to have an incredible team supporting me that, you know, says, do what you got to do. We know you're going to get it done. And it might mean that I send emails at odd hours, but it doesn't mean you have to respond to me. That's just really what works for my childcare schedule. And I think making spaces available for folks so that you don't have to ask, like, where can I go nurse or where can I go pump, but making those benefits available to folks so that if you're not quite comfortable having the conversation with perhaps your leader, it's readily available, it's accessible, you can kind of self-serve if you need. So that's worked really well for us. But I will say one thing to just kind of keep in mind is that as you have folks that are doing flexible work, you will start to see, I mean, we've heard it already, that women tend to raise their hand more for this because of either childcare needs or they're perhaps helping care for someone in their close community or in their family, chosen or otherwise. And so you see them raise their hands, but that also means they're not there in person for some of those ad hoc meetings that happen. You know, it's inevitable that people get together maybe in the lunchroom or perhaps around the copy machine because everybody's grabbing something, you know, and you have these conversations that you might just not get access to when you're on Zoom or you're working sort of different hours. So I say be cautious about it. Something that I have recently learned as a new term is mommy tracked. So just being mindful of, you know, make sure you're not mommy tracking folks that allows them really to kind of like slowly fade out of your workforce because they're remote. Be intentional. You've just really got to be intentional about how you invite those people in and make space for them to participate virtually, in person, or otherwise, because the reality is that works for beyond just mothers. It works for working fathers, working parents. You have people that are a dispersed workforce generally, and perhaps you can't recruit the diversity of your workforce here, so you've started tapping into new markets across the US. Those folks will just not get included if you're not intentional. And then how are they going to lead in your company? How are they going to really grow and develop within your company if they don't have the same access through mentorship, sponsorship, just other sort of more casual connections where maybe it's not a loaded professional experience, but a chance to connect?
Different kind of professional experience,
Yeah.
right? And you actually answered my follow-up question, which was about the mommy track. I think that that's something that everybody lauded work from home. Oh, it's so great. Oh, it's so flexible. But have been reading a lot of papers, a lot of consulting companies are coming out saying, you know, look, this is actually could be even more detrimental to the workforce than the secession that we're talking about today, because it just puts women on this track that is going to, or any kind of caretaker on this track, that they just become invisible. And I think that that's a word and a message to leaders out there to really understand, you know, how can you be intentional about it? It's not easy. Look, I mean, like none of this is easy, and we're not proposing that these are just plug and play solutions that, you know, you implement tomorrow and everything is going to be fine. This is really hard work, and if we are going to make this work, we have to be willing to spend the time and walk the walk, like VF Corp and Guild Education and really have the hard conversations about how we're going to transform our organizations to be able to do this. We're trying to do it with climate change. We might as well do it with this while we're at it, right?
Yeah, it's an investment in your culture.
It's an investment in the future of your company, as far as I'm concerned, because if you don't do this now, you will not be able to recruit 10 years from now. They're actually talking about, there was a great podcast the other day on The Economist, and it was talking about how healthcare 10 years ago, healthcare was like the number one thing that people were starting to use as recruitment tools. Now it's just a given, right? And they actually think that this kind of work, understanding how to deal with flexible work experiences, work from home, that is the next big recruitment tool. And if a company doesn't get on board today, small, big, whatever size you are, then you are not going to be able to recruit people 10 years from now. So put the practices in place now and use our paper to start. So Angel, I actually want to switch this to small business because you're on the other end of VF Corp. Hopefully someday you will be a VF Corp. But as you grow your company, what are some of those initiatives and policies that you want to integrate to ensure that you're supporting your employees and yourself, obviously, whether it's motherhood, caretaking, just let's call it, live-work balance, one of those elusive things. So what are some of those things that you're thinking about, especially as you hear some of the conversations in the room today?
Well, the thing I'm thinking about, because I only have one employee right now, we both don't have children. So it's just normalizing being a mother or a caretaker. So even though I only have one employee that doesn't have a child, when I did hop on Zoom meetings with people throughout marketing or some type of avenue that did have children and their children were louder in the background, they were like, oh, I'm so sorry. I was like, well, don't apologize. My upstairs neighbors are way louder than me. So
dog, right?
That's something. And then just having a culture that's inclusive and collaborative. So we have a very laid back culture with my employee and I right now. We sometimes do work and we're in beanbag chairs. So just want to make sure that environment is not so stuffy, where we can all motivate each other and we're all inclusive and really driving the point across to our customers that we care about them and that we care about our employees just as much.
Absolutely, and I think that to that point, as people are coming back from working from home, having the office environment, having a work environment, have that level of comfort. I mean, I really think that that's something that we've talked a lot about. TARRA, the workspace that we're designing, is meant to be, I call it way better than your home, right? It has that comfort level, that sense of sort of coziness that gives people that sense that they're welcome there, right? And I think that that's something that is going to evolve over time, and certainly I'll take a beanbag chair all day long. So. Well, I do want to close. We're going to have one more question to Naomi, and then we are going to go to our questions from the chat. So please don't forget to add anything else. We've got about 5 more minutes until we start our Q&A from the audience. But I want to close with the conversation about universal childcare, which is sort of, ding, ding, ding. To me, this is the number one thing that we could do at a giant federal policy or state or local level to actually create true equity in the workplace. This has been a conversation since the 1970s. This is not new, and somehow we still haven't been able to get it passed. I think that I'm curious where we are at I kind of know there's conversations in the national sphere, but where are we in Colorado with this conversation? And I'm just going to say, mayor's office and governor's office can.
So you're exactly right. This conversation is not new. And actually, for those that are interested, there is a great podcast called No One's Coming to Save Us. It talks about the current climate, but it also gives you the history of the conversations leading back to, I believe, World War II, when women had to work because the men were out serving, and there were supports then, and then those went away. And there's reasons behind that. So I definitely encourage folks to listen to that. So where we are today, universal childcare is a part of the Build Back Better plan that the administration is trying to get through Congress. And I will say that has really helped in, I don't want to say normalizing the conversation, but continuing it and connecting it back to how do we recover from this pandemic? How do we provide the supports for women that want to work? Because I talk to a lot of my friends. The one thing we talk about when deciding to have a child is childcare. And who's going to watch our kid when we go back to work? And am I going to make enough to justify a childcare cost because it's too expensive? And that shouldn't be a factor in the conversation about having a family. So I say all that, and that the conversation I feel like has shifted about how do we address these workforce challenges, because there are positions going unfilled because women don't feel like they have the support needed because they have a family or they want to start a family. So while that is happening in DC, there's a lot of conversations happening at the state level as it relates to what can the state be doing. So in Colorado, voters approved funding that supports universal pre-K, and that'll be going into effect soon. There's bills right now at the state legislature related to tax credits for those that want to go into the early childcare space because there's a worker shortage as well. There's I believe a bill around tax credits for like home care providers that want to offer childcare in their home. So those are all incremental ways that I think can get at the larger issue until we have universal pre-K. But I think we know that that will still take some time. So what are the things we can do at a state and local level to increase childcare options while also working towards that larger goal of universal childcare?
Great. Well, we will look forward to hearing more about that in the future. So I think we are ready for some Q&A from the audience, and I'm going to let Megan, our voice over there, ask the questions.
Yes, thank you. First of all, at least for the audience members who are active in the chat today, and the chat is very active, by the way, we're all feeling very inspired by you all. So thank you so much for all the resources and ideas and everything that you're sharing today. I want to also just quickly mention that we are going to be compiling all these resources that you mentioned and all of the ones that are coming through in the chat as well. And we'll get that out to everybody who registered, so stay tuned for that. So one of the questions that came through the chat brings us back to policy. There's been some discussion about the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act. Do you think that Colorado's pay transparency law has been helping pay equity? Is it too soon to tell? A lot of businesses still seem to be pushing back on this nationwide. And then another person mentioned the Pay Equity Act has also seemed to push salaries down rather than up. Some struggle to hire people at a higher rate because they're comparing to previous salaries. And could this be fixed with legislation? So maybe if you want to address this, and then we can have a discussion.
Yeah, I know, data is still being collected around, because it's only been in effect for, I think, about a year. But I think just generally in conversations I have with folks, it's been helpful because, again, they're not having to guess. They can see what a position will pay and then determine if they should go towards that. I don't know if I can speak to necessarily the impacts on like salary ranges per se, but as there's data to show that that is happening on I think a regular basis, there could be a public policy intervention to address that. I will say there's been discussion around the idea of like remote work and specifically some employers not wanting to hire people from Colorado. I think as that has been elevated in terms of those specific companies, there's been backlash because it doesn't necessarily look good for you to not recruit from a great state that has such great candidates. So, with a big change like that, I would say too, there's always going to be things that come up, and there's always an opportunity for what we call cleanup legislation or trying to address some of the challenges that come, but at least we're elevating what those things that are coming up as the legislation's being implemented, and I think there is a willingness to address those things because at the end of the day, the intent of it is to address pay equity. That is something that we hear loud and clear is things to be done in order to support women in the workforce, so I think we can work to address those things as they come up.
I can say that, we're actively hiring 2 positions right now, and actually our pay equity study raised our salaries by $20,000 a year, both of them, because we realized that we were on the lower end and we immediately bumped them up by 20K. So I don't know if that's happening, the opposite direction, but for us it was really a big deal, and we were able to get some great candidates as a result.
Yeah, you speak to the transparency piece that is critical. Like, how do you make changes when you don't know what the baseline is? Yep. Because nobody's talking about it. So that is, I think, is a great benefit. And if more companies and employers can have those studies and see, okay, am I paying too low? Should I be doing more? Like, it's all again part of the conversation and addressing the larger issue.
Absolutely. Even as like a small business, if you don't maybe have the resources to pay for the giant kind of book that will tell you sort of ranges across the U.S., as a small business, you can look and see, okay, this one has a similar kind of size as me. They are paying about this, so you at least know how to be competitive when you're trying to find talent. If you don't want to spend the thousands of dollars of your precious, budget for incredible leggings on, on these kinds of things, it's sort of you have to figure out how you prioritize it, and so it allows you to still kind of take action on that, and not have to spend the thousands of dollars trying to find the studies that are out there.
And
that
ask your
wonderful
network,
organizations do.
right?
Yeah.
Ask the people around you, what are you paying for this? And I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's part of why, organizations like ours exist. So
Yeah.
Great. Next question.
Yeah, so another question from the audience. Someone mentioned that industries such as engineering and construction, they keep talking about recruitment initiatives. What can we do to get more people into these fields? But what can we suggest to change that narrative to retaining women in these industries and all industries?
I think that, Julie, I mean, you're in the technology world, so that may be a really good question for you, because that is kind of synonymous with the AEC world, very male-dominated, very much in the STEM, sector. So
Yes.
how are you all? I mean, obviously you're doing all the things. Let's be honest.
I don't know about
What
that.
do you think that kind of from a broader perspective, what can companies do that are very male-dominated industries do to retain those female employees?
Oh, it's such a great question. Working in information security, this is definitely a topic that's been going on for many years. I'd say one of the things that we heard about in the report that I think is really important is mentoring, either internal mentoring or finding a mentor outside. I would say the other thing is really offering training for women to be able to hold their ground. I hate to say it like that, but hold your ground in a meeting. Or there's many times I'll walk in a room, I might be the only woman in the room. And so working on your skills of being present, of feeling okay being in charge, those are things that are kind of softer skills that you want women to feel comfortable where they're at in the workforce. I think the other thing is that Guild is a huge proponent of this, is just-in-time training or skilling up, maybe not going back to school for a 4-year degree or 2-year degree, but what's the next class you need to get to the next level? And so I think really promoting that for the women and retaining, obviously, child care is huge. I don't think we could say that enough. So that would.
Well, and I think to that point, and to the question that was in the audience, we do want the businesses to be providing these types of resources, but it is also an individual conversation for us to say, what skills do I need? What do I need to retain myself effectively, right? What do I need to be able to walk into that room and feel like my voice is actually heard? And it's part of it is our own kind of ownership of what we need to be doing, what kind of skill sets we need going, and asking our leaders and our executives, and if you're a small business, asking yourself what you need to learn to be able to take that to the next level. It's hard, but it is worth it. And I think that if we, again, get that bottom up and top down approach, that's the way that we really close the gap.
Yeah, I would say one other thing that we've talked about on the panel a little bit is women not hurting women in the workforce either. And so really making sure that you're elevating the women in your workforce. I know you have some great stories on this one, but
I feel like even in the military, a lot of the women around me, we know a mutual person they've always helped elevate me. So it shouldn't be, oh, there's too many women in the room. I hate that saying, because I feel like all the people that have really helped me are women, and they're okay sharing their ideas with me. They're okay telling me how to grow, and that's how it always should be. There can never be enough women in the room.
Yeah, I know for me, I wouldn't be where I am today unless I had that sponsorship from someone that was like, you work really hard. I think you'd be interested in this role or taking on this project. And I'm just like heads down doing my work. But having somebody do that for me has helped me so much. And now I want to do that for other people as well, because also too, it helps to see other people like you in your space of work.
Well, and Simone talks about that a lot. It's mentorship, but even more importantly, especially in bigger companies, it's sponsorship. And it's really, that hand reaching down and saying, come with me, I'm going to show you truly what the path is through to this next, to this next step. And unfortunately in small business, you don't have that somebody else, but you can look to other entrepreneurs and other business owners to say, how did you get there? I mean, that's a lot of what I did, was just how did you get there? I reached out to men, I reached out to women, and really, was able to kind of get some of that hand up. So that's great. Next question.
I'm going to combine a couple of questions here because we have a lot of activity on the chat. Someone said we get the DEI, EDI idea. however you spell it, right? It's about diversity. But let's add a B in there for belonging. You can bring diverse talent, give them a voice, but if they don't feel welcome or part of the team, it's just going with the motion. And another piece of that is there's a lot of discussion on the chat about, let's talk about ageism in the workplace. We talked a little bit about young mothers, for example, but let's talk about some older women in the workplace and how do we address ageism in the workplace? And maybe everyone can answer that.
I'm happy to start a little bit. I think belonging is really important. You are so right. I mean, you can bring diversity to the table, you can work on inclusion, but if the person does not feel like they belong, you've kind of missed it. You've missed your moment to really propel it forward. And so I think for us, we think a lot about like, how are we creating spaces where people feel like they can belong however they want to show up. So really being free to be yourself and show up authentically. Because if you think about just like the mental tax of kind of having to code switch, of change kind of who you are at work versus who you are at home versus who you are with friends, it's exhausting. And frankly, I think we're all pretty exhausted right now in a pandemic. We don't need one more thing. And so creating workspaces where folks really feel like they can belong is really important. And some of that can truly just be as simple as like, get to know each other, find some common things to talk about. It doesn't need to be all business all the time, because that just adds another layer of pressure to it. But I agree, I think belonging is truly really important in your own workplace, but also just in the communities in which you're operating. So making sure that as you're, I've met all these wonderful people, making sure that like, I can be a person where they feel comfortable to reach out if they say, hey, you know what, I saw an opportunity, or hey, I would love to connect on a project. How do you allow them to feel like they can belong in the ecosystem that you operate in as well? I think is hugely important.
Absolutely. Does anybody want to address the ageism in the workforce? I mean, as a 45-year-old woman, I've had lots of conversations with my friends and my peers and those, who are above me in age, and there's a significant fear of anybody my age and older of losing a job, not being able to find another one. I've had friends who have absolutely been passed over once the person saw them in person. And as we work longer, as we, are able to live longer, I know that I don't want to retire until I'm 75, right? But I do. Every once in a while, I wake up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night and think, what would happen if I didn't have my business and I needed to go find another job when I'm age 55? What are some thoughts here about that? Is Guild doing anything? Is VF Corp? Are there any, I don't know if there's any policies or bills that are starting to come down the line, but this seems like it's something that it's kind of the next conversation, right?
I would say, I think it's a very real fear. So just want to validate that yes, it makes sense that you're worried, like what happens next? What happens if what I'm doing now maybe isn't like the relevant skill in the next year or the next couple years? But I would challenge folks to really think through, like, as an employer, how are you finding ways to upskill everyone in different ways? Because what I may be doing now isn't maybe what I want to be doing in a couple years, or maybe there's a skill set that can overlap with it that will really allow me to kind of pivot into different work. So I think supporting folks in whichever path they'd like to take in their career is really important. But the other piece I would say is just thinking through, you see it sometimes where folks will take a period of time out to take care of family or something, and then they're returning to their workforce in their 40s kind of thinking, okay, I know I kicked butt at what I was doing in my personal life, and I know that I have all of these skills, but what does that employer see? And so I really challenge employers to look at it and realize, like, even if they were in unconventional roles or in something that wasn't particularly in your workforce or traditional workforce, there's so much value in people, particularly for the time they've spent doing whatever it is they're doing. I think about year over year, we get wiser and wiser. You learn something new. You've got something else. You're like, man, didn't realize that last year, but now I know that I can do differently. And so recognizing that they can really add value to your workforce in so many different ways, I think is super important. And that it doesn't necessarily mean, like you'll see it sometimes where you're interviewing someone and they have been in the workforce and have so much experience, but they're applying for a job that perhaps you think they're never going to want to stay here. What do you mean? Like they've already done all these incredible things, but trust the candidate. Trust that the candidate knows what they want. They're applying for a reason. They're applying because they're interested in that. So I think really going with allowing them to take the lead when they come in as a candidate who perhaps maybe you think would have been at a different place in their career or something, to support them and trust that they're applying for something they care about and get to know them and understand sort of what they can bring to your workforce is really important.
Naomi, that seemed to strike a chord with you. I'm curious what you're
No, well, I was
there.
just thinking, there's efforts right now around those that have a criminal background and trying to get away from those hindrances and when they're applying for jobs and housing and whatnot. So I'm like, is there something around and it's been, I can't remember my last job application, but getting rid of birthdays or putting in dates for when you've worked at specific roles to get away from well, how long is this person in the workforce? It doesn't matter if they can do the job. So maybe there's something there, but I think about there's just so many great individuals. And clearly if you're applying for a job, it's because you want a job, you need a job, and you like that work. It shouldn't matter how old you are or how long you've been in the industry.
Agreed.
I think especially now as we're having challenges trying to fill roles.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
So important.
Absolutely. Great. One more question and then, okay.
One last question, and this is for every panelist. Julie, if you want to start us off. The audience is wondering if you could pick one program or law or solution or one thing that you think would have the most impact to implement right away, what would it be?
Oh, to support women. I think the most impactful thing we could do right now is help get people into early childcare education or teachers, supporting teachers, because one thing that we're seeing is that if you don't have access to childcare, you can't go back. You don't have access to childcare, and because there's so many people leaving the industry. So I think this would be impactful across the board, is supporting early childcare and education.
I think for me, and I don't know how you make this into a law or whatnot, but we've seen flexibility has been allowed for women to address all the things in their life while they're working. How do we make sure that that's the norm and that employees don't feel like they are going to be retaliated against should they ask, I need a flexible work arrangement because this has happened in my life? COVID has definitely provided that, but how do we ensure that that happens in the long term, especially if that's not necessarily being offered by an employer?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I would have it so small business owners wouldn't have to fill out their gender or their race on everything. So I find that sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish I'll just check the other box. Maybe they won't care. But it's just for gender, you have to pick one or, so I wish those could be left off because it doesn't matter. If the business credentials speak for themselves, why does it matter?
Agreed.
Yeah. I don't know that it's a policy or a law, like you were saying, but I think really prioritizing mentorship and sponsorship are so important, and it transcends just women, but you are seeing so many women missing out on those opportunities because they don't have the right person in the room. You think about, who knows about you, who knows what you can do, and who can kind of play your card in the room when you're not there. So really prioritizing that as a business to make sure that you have a leadership team that's invested in that and that is really looking to continue to build that internal talent, I think is just a really incredible way to support.
Excellent. I could be here all day, but I think I was just told that we have to wrap. Thank you all so much. This was an incredible conversation. What an incredible morning we have had, and I hope you are all leaving here today feeling invigorated and motivated to continue the hard work towards a more equitable world of work for women. I want to thank our panelists again for engaging in this conversation. This is just the start of a very important conversation, and we are thrilled to have leaders like you by our side. Thank you to our presenting sponsor, Amazon, our Premier Access sponsor, First Bank, and our sustaining sponsors, Health One and Holder FCI Constructors. We hope you are all equally motivated by their commitment to advancing all women in the workforce. Another big thank you to Metropolitan State University and our research team for their exceptional work. Thank you to Governor Polis for creating such a great state for women to start and grow businesses. As the year unfolds, we, Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce and TARRA, have several exciting endeavors to announce. TARRA will actually be opening our very first campus. It's a workspace and flexible office space this summer at 9th and Colorado. We'll be releasing more details in March, so stay tuned to our Instagram for more details.
And the Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce would like to invite you all to join us as we kick off our 2022 Powerful Voices series presented by Bank of America on February 24th. So check out our website and join us. You don't want to miss the conversation.
Definitely don't want to miss the conversation. So on behalf of TARRA
And the Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce, we wish you a great afternoon.